Today I'm sharing my final thoughts on Victober and my October reading wrap-up. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. So today I have just a few books left to talk to you about from October and Victober and all the wonderful books that I read during the month of October. I looked back at my journal and I had read 15 books plus some picture books that I didn't actually record in my reading journal. 10 of those books were Victorian, so I read 10 for Victober and then 5 other books in between, and it was a wonderful month of reading. I think this has been the best month of the entire year, which is not surprising because Victober is always my favorite, so it's not a surprise that I had a great month of reading. And I will say that I don't know if I just am getting better at choosing books according to what I like to read, but I had a lot of 4- and 5-star books during Victober. So I was really impressed with that. If you have not seen the videos from the previous weeks that I talked about some of my Victorian books, just look down below. I'll try to remember to link to that so that you can see the other books that I read earlier this month. And these are the books that I've read over the past week or so at the end of October. So I read A Dark Night's Work by Elizabeth Gaskell. If you follow my channel, you know that I'm trying to read all of her novels and her short stories. And I think this is a novella. This book was an okay read for me. I enjoyed it. It had all the wonderful elements of Elizabeth Gaskell's style. But again, it's so short. Just have as much characterization as I would have wanted, and her novels are just so much more in depth than that. So I did enjoy it. I enjoyed her, what was the one we read last year? Gothic Tales. I enjoyed Gothic Tales, but it was kind of like that for me. It was okay. I enjoyed them, but nothing that memorable for me. There is a moment in this where there is a boom and something happens and it's like, okay, did not see that coming, and then it kind of spirals from there into just a whole nother story. I did enjoy that about it. It made it really interesting, but it did seem a little over the top. So anyway, it was an okay read. Then I read The Story Girl. I don't have that one because I didn't have a copy of it, so I checked out the audio version of this one. This is a book by Ellen Montgomery, and I am hosting the More Montgomery Challenge, so I wanted to read this one. I think this might be a duology. Let me know in the comments because I can't remember. But anyway, The Story Girl it's supposed to be one story about this girl who tells a lot of stories, and she is an interesting character because everyone loves to come over and listen to her tell stories. The problem I had was there's not really a plot to the story. It's just like trying to connect a bunch of short stories together and make a story. So I didn't like that about it because I didn't feel like I cared enough about the characters because there really wasn't a plot to it. The problem I had though with her stories were that they were almost just gossip. It was like she was just this nosy little girl who would eavesdrop and hear these things, and then she would tell the story, and sometimes she might have been exaggerating, but she would tell these stories about the different people in the area. And I was like, okay, I don't approve of you just going around telling stories about your neighbors. But anyway, it was other stories too, not just that. But that kind of bothered me that she was being celebrated by eavesdropping and telling these stories that this little kid didn't even, I was thinking, you need to mind your own business. So anyway, that was my thoughts on The Story Girl. It was okay, but it was not my favorite Ellen Montgomery. And then I read for Victober, a nonfiction, My Dearest Albert, Queen Victoria's Life Through Her Letters and Journals. This was a good book. It wasn't that long. It's, you know, just a slim volume of bits and pieces of her letters and journals. I enjoyed that about it because it's like a basic overview of Queen Victoria while she reigned and her life with Albert. But I would like more, and I'm sure there's other books. If you've read any great books about Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, let me know in the comments, because I am interested in that. This, again, it was a really good read and interesting, but I wanted more than just this little book. A great overview, though, of her letters and journals. After that, I was able to squeeze in, I had finished everything. I was so proud of myself, y'all, because I had this list of Victober TBR of the books I wanted to read for each prompt. I read the group read, I read something for all the prompts, and then I was like, oh wow, I've got a whole week left, and I have finished all the prompts. So I was really proud of that, including some picture books and all too that I read. So I decided to pick up another Charles Dickens because I'm trying to read all of his work, and I picked up Hard Times by Charles Dickens. And I'm not going to tell you too much about this one because I want to do a review of every one of his books, and since I've already started doing that on my channel, I will be posting a review of this one soon, probably next week. So just be on the lookout if you're interested in more about Hard Times. So I did read that one, and that was my final book for Victober. And then I read a couple of other books that were on my TBR. Now this book was a book that was actually on my TBR in September, and it was for a group read. Becca from Hicks Picks Books, she has a Facebook page where we're reading different books, and I'm obviously not doing a good job because this was from September, but it was a historical fiction called The Last Year of the War by Susan Meisner, and I had started it in September. I set it down because I had so many other things to read, and then I picked it back up last week, and I really loved this book. It was an interesting read. It's about two young girls who are placed in an internment camp with their families during World War II. What was interesting, though, was one of the girls is Japanese, the other girl is German. And I know I am ignorant, but I had no idea. I knew about Japanese internment camps, of course, but I didn't even think about Germans being put there, placed there too. I did not think about the Germans also being placed at the internment camps. I don't know why. I mean, obviously they would have done that. Because of the fears that they, fear makes us do a lot of crazy things. So I guess I just didn't know that they were there at the same time. But in these internment camps, these two girls meet, their families meet, and it goes on from there. So it goes through the life of the German girl. It's basically her story, and then after they leave the camp, what happens, and then her search for finding her friend later on in her life. So I enjoyed this. It was a really interesting read. I love Susan Meisner's writing. I thought her writing was fantastic. And I have another one on my shelf right now that I hope to get to since it's Historathon, called Nature of Fragile Things. I think that's what it's called. So I hope to get to that one soon because I am enjoying Susan Meisner's writing. And if you've read any other Susan Meisner that you think I would enjoy, let me know that in the comments. And then finally, I read Something Wicked This Way Comes by Ray Bradbury. I'm trying to decide what to even say about this book because I know the title, Something Wicked This Way Comes, makes you think it's a horror. And it is scary and creepy, but not overly scary. I like this book. Obviously, I like this book if you look at all the tabs. I mean, I was underlining and annotating and discussing. I buddy read this with Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf and Art from A Book Odyssey, and we talked every day as we read it, and we had a lot of discussion on this book because there's so much to talk about. It's about good and evil, and what I loved about it, it was clearly good versus evil, because I don't like it when you celebrate evil in any kind of way. This is about how we deal with time and growing older and death, and how we are susceptible as humans to falling into temptation, and what that means when we do fall into temptation and succumb to the evil and bring others down with us. So those are the kind of questions and thoughts that you have as you go through this story. Again, go in this blind if you don't know anything about it. That makes it more interesting. It is more magical realism though, so think of that. If you're not interested in magical realism, you might not enjoy it. I don't even read a lot of that kind of book, but this was poetry on the page. And the topics is why I found it to be so interesting. And again, I love the Twilight Zone, and that's the kind of feel it has. So if you enjoy those kind of, if you enjoy the Twilight Zone and those kind of short stories, you may enjoy Something Wicked This Way Comes. But this was a 5-star, a fantastic read, and a great ending to my October reading. So those are the books that I read. We also watched some movies, some adaptations for Victober of some of the books I was reading. We watched The Woman in White. I thought that was pretty good. It really stuck with the story, the book, but it seemed a little creepier to me. The way that the music that they used, the tone, the darkness, it really made it more of a scary movie than just a sensation novel to me. But I did enjoy that one. And then we watched, and I can't remember who told me about this one, but someone had recommended watching The Invisible Man from the 1930s. It was fantastic. I loved that. If you enjoy The Invisible Man by H.G. Wells, you would love the 1930s, sometime in the 1930s version of The Invisible Man. It's, of course, it's black and white. And they make it super scary in that movie. But again, it's from the 1930s, so it's not as scary or violent as things today. I love the way that they created the so-called Invisible Man in that one, though. The way that they used the camera was interesting, you know, because technology was different then. I found it to be a fun one and an interesting one, and so I watched that one last week too, so that was a great one as well. So I had a great Victober. I've read some wonderful books. I'm going to just keep reading the Victorian literature all year long because I love it so much. Let me know what you read in October. Again, thank you to the Victober host as well. You did a fantastic job. All of you did some wonderful videos, and I really enjoyed that. And it just makes it so much more special when we all come together and read Victorian literature together. So let me know in the comments what you read for October. What was your favorite read during the month of October, and what are you reading right now? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.